to women who overcome infertility. Evelyn Rothwell's voice rang through the crystal chandeliers of the foundation gala, her champagne glass raised toward me. 200 guests turned to stare. Cameras flashed like lightning. My husband Adrian squeezed my hand under the table, but I felt the warning in his grip. Don't make a scene, don't embarrass the family. The laughter rippled through the crowd, polite but cutting. I stood there in my borrowed diamonds, the girl from nowhere who'd married into everything, and felt my heart crack into 1,000 pieces. But my face stayed smooth as glass. I smiled at Evelyn, meeting her triumphant gaze across the spotlight. You're right, Evelyn, I said quietly into the microphone someone had thrust toward me. Truth always finds its way home. Her smile faltered for just a moment. The cameras loved it. But before I tell you what that means, I continued, you need to know how we got here. The room went silent. I stepped back from the podium, my hands steady despite everything. This was my moment. But first they needed to understand the woman who'd spent 3 years destroying me. 3 years earlier, I was just Dinah Marsh, a 31-year-old interior designer with a small studio in Brooklyn. My apartment had mismatched furniture and windows that were stuck in summer. I worked 12-hour days building something that was mine. Then I met Adrian Rothwell at a charity auction where I donated my design services. He was handsome in that effortless way wealthy men are, with kind eyes and a laugh that made me feel like I was the only person in the room. We married 8 months later in a ceremony that cost more than my parents' house. Evelyn smiled through every moment of the wedding, her teeth white and perfect. She hugged me before I walked down the aisle and whispered, "Welcome to the family, dear. We'll make something of you yet." I thought she meant well. I thought the diamond bracelet she gave me that night was a peace offering. But when I looked closer at the engraving, my blood ran cold. It didn't say my name. It said, Rothwell Property. I laughed it off. Adrian said his mother had an old-fashioned sense of humor. 6 months into our marriage, I attended my first Rothwell Foundation brunch. The women there wore wealth like a second skin, speaking in a language of charity galas and summer houses. I tried to fit in, smiling and nodding in all the right places. Evelyn sat at the head of the table, holding court. Halfway through the meal, her voice dropped to a stage whisper. Poor Dinah and Adrian are having some challenges in the baby department, she said, patting my hand with full sympathy. But we're praying for a miracle. The room went quiet, heat flooded my face. I hadn't told anyone we were trying, I hadn't even told Adrian we were having trouble, but somehow Evelyn knew. On the drive home I confronted Adrian. He brushed it off. She's just worried about us, Dinah, that's what mothers do. But worry doesn't explain what I found 2 weeks later. Evelyn's number saved in my fertility doctor's phone under emergency contact. I never put it there. I called the clinic the next morning, my hands shaking. Dr. Reynolds sounded uncomfortable when I asked about Evelyn. Mrs. Rothwell called several times, he admitted. She said she was your authorized family representative. She wanted updates on your IVF cycle. My stomach dropped. I never authorized that. Silence on the other end, then quieter. She also requested we postpone your last appointment. She said the stress was affecting your mental health and that you needed time to rest. I hung up without saying goodbye. The appointment she'd cancelled was the one where they would have transferred the embryos that didn't survive the delay. I sat in my car outside the clinic for an hour, unable to move. When I finally drove home, I found a message from Evelyn on my phone. Just checking in, sweetheart. Make sure you're taking care of yourself. Family is everything. I deleted it. But I didn't forget. 2 months later, Evelyn organised a luncheon for the foundation's major donors. She insisted I attend, saying it would be good for me to stay busy. The event was at the Rothwell estate, with photographers documenting every moment for the charity's annual report. Halfway through, Evelyn called me over to where she stood with a young mother and her toddler. Dinah, hold little Emma for a photo, she said brightly. You look so natural with children. I took the baby, smiling for the camera. The flashbulbs popped. Then I heard Evelyn's voice, low and intimate with the photographer beside her. She loves children, just can't have her own. The words were meant to carry, and they did. By evening the photo was everywhere on social media with captions about my brave face despite personal struggles. I stared at my phone, watching strangers dissect my pain. That's when I noticed something. In the background of one photo, a journalist stood with his camera pointed not at me, but at Evelyn. And he was recording everything. I found the journalist's card slipped under my car's windshield wiper a week later. Plain white cardstock with simple black text. You don't know me, but you should. Call when you're ready. M. Hayes Jr. I turned the card over and over in my hands. Part of me wanted to throw it away, to pretend I hadn't seen the calculation in his eyes at the luncheon. But another part of me, a part I was just beginning to recognize, wanted answers. I tucked the card into my wallet and didn't mention it to Adrian. That night at dinner, Evelyn announced she was redecorating the foundation's main office. "Dinah, darling, I'd love your professional opinion," she said sweetly. "Come by tomorrow and help me choose new frames for the board photos." I agreed because saying no to Evelyn was like saying no to the ocean. The next day I arrived at the foundation office with my design portfolio, and that's when I found something that changed everything. Hidden behind a loose frame in Evelyn's private office was a letter, yellow with age, folded into a small square. The handwriting was masculine, urgent, and it began, "My darling Evelyn, does he look like me yet?" The letter was dated 33 years ago, 2 months before Adrian was born. My hands trembled as I read the passionate words, the desperate pleas for Evelyn to leave her husband. It was signed simply, "Forever yours, M." I photographed it with shaking hands, then carefully replaced it exactly as I'd found it. When Evelyn returned with fabric samples, I was calmly reviewing paint colors, as if my world hadn't just tilted sideways. That night I pulled out the journalist's card. Michael Hayes Jr., the son of the man who wrote that letter. I couldn't be sure, but the coincidence felt too large to ignore. I sent a single text, "We need to talk." His response came within minutes, "Tomorrow, 2 p.m. The coffee shop in Madison. I lay awake all night next to Adrian, watching him sleep. He had Evelyn's sharp cheekbones, her straight nose, but his eyes were different, softer. I'd always thought he got them from his father. Now I wasn't so sure. Evelyn called the next morning before I could leave for my meeting. "Dinner tonight, dear, just the two of us. I think it's time we really got to know each other." Her tone was warm, but I heard the steel underneath. At dinner she was charming. She complimented my dress, my posture, and how I handled the stress of our situation with grace. Every kind word felt like a trap. Dessert arrived with something else, a thick envelope. "Just some paperwork," Evelyn said lightly. "Our lawyers suggested updating the prenup, standard procedure." I opened it. The document was clear. If I failed to produce an heir within 5 years, I would forfeit any claim to the Rothwell estate or foundation. "It protects everyone," Evelyn said, sipping her wine. "I'm sure you understand." I signed nothing. I smiled, thanked her for dinner, and left. In my car I finally let myself shake. But beneath the fear something harder was forming. She wanted an heir, I'd give her something better. I'd give her the truth. I drove straight to Madison Street. Michael Hayes was waiting. Michael looked nothing like I expected. He was younger, maybe 35, with tired eyes that had seen too much. We sat in the back corner of the coffee shop where no one would notice us. "You found the letter," he said. It wasn't a question. "Your father wrote it," he nodded slowly. "My father loved her his whole life, even after she chose Arthur Rothwell's money over him, even after she got pregnant and passed the baby off as her husband's." The words hung between us. "Adrian doesn't know," I whispered. "No one knows except my father, and he's dying now, pancreatic cancer. He wanted me to find proof before he goes, to finally tell the truth." I thought of Adrian, of the life we'd built, of all the lies underneath it. "Why tell me?" "Because Evelyn's destroying you the same way she destroyed my father, and I'm done watching her win." He slid a folder across the table. Inside were bank records, emails, evidence of embezzlement from the foundation. "Help me bring her down," Michael said, "and I'll help you get free." That night I couldn't sleep. I kept thinking about the woman who'd raised Adrian, who'd fed him lies with his breakfast and ambition with his dinner. Who was she protecting, herself, or the empire she'd built on secrets? Michael's evidence was damning. Evelyn had been siphoning foundation funds for years, moving money through shell accounts and fake vendors. But the smoking gun was a series of payments marked H Trust for MH hush money. Paid to Michael Hayes SR to keep him quiet about Adrian's paternity. I took photos of everything and returned the folder. Then I did something reckless. I told Adrian, not everything, just enough. "Your mother has been interfering with my medical treatment. She cancelled my IVF appointment without telling me." He looked shocked. "That can't be right. Why would she do that? Ask her yourself." But I already knew what would happen. Evelyn got to him first. The next morning, Adrian sat me down with concern in his eyes. "Mom's worried about you. She thinks the fertility stress is making you paranoid." I realized then that I was alone in this. Adrian would always choose his mother because that's what children of manipulative parents do. They can't see the strings. I stopped arguing. I smiled and nodded and played the part of the concerned wife getting help for her stress. Meanwhile, I kept meeting Michael. He taught me how to access Evelyn's old emails through the foundation server, how to search for keywords, how to track money that didn't want to be found. We worked like investigators, like people with nothing left to lose, and then I found it. An email from 15 years ago, casual and brief. Payment process to H Trust as agreed. Consider this matter closed. Attached was a photo. Evelyn holding baby Adrian in a garden, and behind her, barely visible, a man's arm. On his wrist was a distinctive watch, silver with a cracked face. Michael's hands shook when I showed him. That's my father's watch. He wore it every day until he sold it to pay for my college. We both knew what this meant. We had our proof. But proof meant nothing if we couldn't verify it. I needed DNA evidence that would hold up in court. The problem was getting samples without anyone knowing. Then I remembered, Evelyn was obsessed with genealogy. 2 years ago, she'd done one of those ancestry DNA kits, fascinated by the results showing her European heritage. She'd kept the kit documentation in her study. I found it during another decorating consultation. The original swab was long gone, but the barcode and account information were there. Meanwhile, I collected one of Adrian's hairs from his brush. It felt like betrayal, stealing pieces of my husband for a test he didn't know about. But this was bigger than us now. Michael helped me send everything to a private lab through his journalist contacts. We paid extra for rush processing and total confidentiality. Then we waited. 3 days later, Michael called. You need to see this. The results were exactly what we'd suspected. Adrian shared 50% of his DNA with Michael Hayes SR. He wasn't a Rothwell by blood, he was Hayes, and Evelyn had hidden it for 33 years. I couldn't move forward without understanding everything, so I went to see Lorna, Evelyn's housekeeper who'd worked for the family for 40 years. She lived in a small cottage on the estate grounds. When I knocked, she seemed surprised but not shocked. I wondered when someone would finally ask questions, she said, letting me in. Over tea she told me what she'd witnessed. Michael Hayes SR visited the estate late at night when Arthur was travelling. Evelyn's tears when Michael stopped coming. And most damning, a conversation Lorna overheard in the nursery weeks after Adrian was born. He's beautiful, Arthur had said, our son, and Evelyn had replied, voice cold as winter, he's mine and you'll raise him as yours because that's what we agreed. Lorna had kept the secret for decades out of loyalty and fear, but now, with Arthur dead and Evelyn's cruelty on full display, she was done protecting her. She handed me an envelope. She kept this in her safe. I made a copy years ago, in case I ever needed it. Inside was Evelyn's original DNA kit information, everything we needed to prove she'd later faked new results. Because that's exactly what Evelyn did. 2 weeks after I'd ordered my secret DNA test, she announced at dinner that she'd decided to do updated genetic testing for health reasons. She encouraged Adrian to do the same. It's important to know our family medical history, she said. Looking pointedly at me, I said nothing, but I knew what she was doing. She suspected someone was digging, and she was creating an official record to counter any challenges. I watched as she scheduled appointments at an exclusive lab, one that catered to wealthy clients who valued discretion. Michael did some digging. The lab's chief technician had received a $50,000 consulting fee from an anonymous donor the same week. We both knew it was Evelyn. She was paying to have the results show what she wanted, that Adrian was a Rothwell through and through. When the official results came back, Evelyn presented them to Adrian with triumph in her eyes. See, perfect Rothwell genetics, mother to son. She glanced at me. No surprises, I smiled softly. How wonderful. That night I met Michael. He handed me our lab's results, the real ones, sealed and certified. She forged them, I said. Yes, and now we can prove it. The next morning everything changed. A local news outlet ran a story. Rothwell Foundation under investigation for financial irregularities. The article was vague but damaging. Donors started asking questions. Board members requested emergency meetings. Evelyn went into crisis mode, blaming staff members, threatening lawsuits, doing everything to control the narrative. I watched from the sidelines, saying nothing. Adrian was stressed, defending his mother while trying to understand what was happening. I played the supportive wife, bringing him coffee and listening to his worries. Inside, I was counting down. Then Evelyn's PR manager quit. Melissa had worked for the foundation for 5 years, managing their public image with skill and discretion. But even she had limits. She handed in her resignation at a board meeting, her face pale with anger. As she left, she stopped by my office. We'd always been cordial but never close. She placed a flash drive on my desk. You didn't get this from me, she said quietly. But someone needs to stop her before she destroys more lives. Then she was gone. I stared at the small device, my heart pounding. Whatever was on it, Melissa thought it was worth burning bridges for. I waited until Adrian left for a business trip before I opened the flash drive. Inside were audio files, dozens of them, recordings of phone calls, meetings, conversations. Melissa had been documenting everything. I listened to Evelyn manipulating donors with lies about where their money was going. I heard her instruct staff to delete emails about untraceable transfers. I heard her laugh about fooling the board, but the recording that made me stop breathing was dated just 3 months ago. Evelyn's voice crystal clear. Michael Hayes was my mistake, a moment of weakness I've spent 30 years paying for, but Adrian is my insurance, my legacy, no one will ever take that from me. Then another voice, her lawyer. What about Dinah? She'll break eventually, Evelyn replied. They always do. And when she does, Adrian will be free to marry someone appropriate, someone who can give us heirs. I sat in the dark, listening to her plan my destruction like it was a business strategy. Something cold and final settled in my chest. She wanted war, I'd give her Armageddon. Evelyn's estranged sister Therese arrived in New York 2 days later. I didn't know Evelyn had a sister until Therese called me. We need to talk about my sister, she said, before she destroys you completely. We met at her hotel. Therese was older than Evelyn by 5 years with the same sharp features but kinder eyes. Evelyn ruined my marriage 30 years ago, she said. She told my husband I was having an affair. She showed him fabricated evidence. By the time I proved it was false, he'd already filed for divorce. Why would she do that? Because I knew about Michael Hayes, I knew Adrian wasn't Arthur's son, and Evelyn couldn't risk me telling anyone. Therese pulled out an old photograph, black and white, slightly faded. Evelyn stood in a garden, visibly pregnant, wearing a man's wedding ring on a chain around her neck. That's not Arthur's ring, Therese said. It's Michael's. He gave it to her before she chose money over love. She handed me the photo. I've stayed silent for 30 years because she threatened to destroy my children too, but I'm done being afraid. I looked at the photo, at the young Evelyn who'd made choices that would echo for decades. Help me end this, I said. I'm ready. Evelyn announced the Rothwell Foundation's 40th anniversary gala 3 weeks later. It would be the event of the season, she declared, televised with press from major outlets celebrating 4 decades of charitable work. And Dinah, she added, looking at me across the dinner table, I expect you to be there, looking perfect, saying nothing controversial. Can you manage that? I met her eyes and smiled. I wouldn't miss it for the world. Over the next 3 weeks I prepared. Michael and I compiled every piece of evidence, the letters, the DNA results, the financial records, the audio files. We built a timeline that showed exactly how Evelyn had manipulated everyone for decades. Therese provided context and verification. Lorna gave sworn testimony. The journalist network Michael worked with fact-checked everything twice. We were building a case so airtight that not even Rothwell money could make it disappear. Meanwhile, I played my role. I attended foundation meetings. I smiled at photo opportunities. I let Evelyn think she'd won. The night before the gala, Adrian found me working on my laptop late. What are you doing? He asked. I closed it gently. Just preparing some remarks for tomorrow. Mom said you shouldn't speak. She thinks it'll be too stressful for you. I looked at my husband, this good man trapped in his mother's web. Adrian, I said softly, what if everything you knew about your family was a lie? He laughed uncomfortably. That's a strange question. Just think about it. I kissed his cheek and went to bed. Tomorrow everything will change. The Rothwell Foundation 40th anniversary gala was held at the Plaza. 500 guests in black tie, with press coverage from every major outlet. The ballroom glittered like something from a fairy tale. Evelyn held court in a silver gown, accepting congratulations and praise. She was in her element, the queen of her carefully constructed empire. I wore deep blue, simple and elegant. I stood beside Adrian, holding his hand, looking like the perfect daughter-in-law. People who'd pitied me at previous events now avoided my eyes, embarrassed by their earlier gossip. Evelyn made several speeches throughout the evening, each one highlighting the foundation's work and the Rothwell family legacy. She spoke about integrity, about service, about the importance of truth in charitable work. The irony was almost beautiful. Finally, she raised her glass for the toast I'd remembered from the beginning. To women who overcome infertility, she said, her eyes finding mine across the room. The room went silent. This was supposed to be my moment of humiliation, my final defeat. Instead, I smiled. And that's when Michael, dressed as media staff, gave me the signal. The broadcast was live, it was time. I walked calmly to the stage. Evelyn looked surprised but stepped aside, probably assuming I was going to thank her publicly, the perfect surrender. I took the microphone, my hands were steady. Thank you all for coming tonight, I began. Evelyn asked me not to speak, but there are some truths that need to be heard. Behind me, the presentation screen flickered to life. It was supposed to show foundation highlights, instead it showed a letter. "This was written 33 years ago," I said. "By Michael Hayes SR to Evelyn Rothwell. It's a love letter to a woman pregnant with his child." Gasps rippled through the crowd. Evelyn's face went white. The screen changed. Bank records, transfer receipts. These show systematic embezzlement of foundation funds over 15 years. Hundreds of thousands of dollars diverted to personal accounts. Evelyn tried to move toward me, but security blocked her path. I'd arranged that earlier. The screen changed again. The DNA results. Clear. Undeniable. And this shows that Adrian Rothwell is not Arthur Rothwell's biological son. He's the son of Michael Hayes. Cameras flashed like lightning. Chaos erupted. Adrian stood frozen in the crowd, his face a mask of shock. And Evelyn, the woman who'd built an empire on lies, collapsed into a chair, not fainting, just broken. She looked up at me and whispered, "Who did this to me?" I leaned close to the microphone. "You did." The gala dissolved into chaos. Guests streamed out, phones in hand, already spreading the news. Board members huddled in corners, lawyers were called. The press swarmed the exits. I walked off the stage calmly, handing the microphone to a shocked event coordinator. Security escorted me out through a back entrance Michael had arranged. Adrian didn't try to follow. He stood in the middle of the ballroom, surrounded by the wreckage of his family's reputation, looking lost. I felt a pang of guilt. He was a victim in this too, but some truths have to be told no matter the cost. The next morning my phone had 300 missed calls. I ignored all of them except one, my lawyer. "The foundation board has initiated a formal investigation," she told me. "Evelyn's been removed as director. Several major donors have pulled funding. It's over, Dinah." "What about Adrian?" "He's requested a separation. For now." I hung up and sat in the quiet of my hotel room. I'd destroyed a family, exposed secrets that had been buried for decades. Part of me felt vindicated. Part of me felt hollow. Then my phone buzzed, a text from Therese. "Thank you, finally she can't hurt anyone else." 2 days later Adrian came to see me. I'd moved into a small apartment in Brooklyn, back to the neighborhood where I'd lived before the Rothwells. He looked older, tired. We sat across from each other with coffee growing cold between us. "Tell me everything," he said. "From the beginning." So I did, every manipulation, every lie. Every moment when Evelyn had worked to break me down. The cancelled IVF appointment. The public humiliation. The forged DNA results. Listened without interrupting. When I finished, tears ran down his face. "I should have believed you," he whispered. "She's my mother. I thought she just wanted to protect me. She wanted to control you. There's a difference." "Who am I?" he asked. "If I'm not a Rothwell, then who am I?" I reached across the table and took his hand. "You're Adrian. You're kind and smart, and you tried to do good with the privilege you were given. Your DNA doesn't change that. But my whole life is a lie." "No," I said firmly. "Her lies were hers, your life is yours." We sat in silence for a while. Then Adrian said something that surprised me. "I'm walking away. From the foundation, from the family name, from all of it. I can't be part of her empire anymore." 6 months later, the Rothwell Foundation was dissolved. An investigation found extensive fraud, and remaining assets were distributed to legitimate charities. Evelyn faced multiple lawsuits. Her reputation was destroyed. She moved to a small house upstate, away from the society that had once worshipped her. She tried calling me once. I didn't answer. But she sent a letter. "You've taken everything from me, my reputation, my son, my life's work. I hope you're satisfied." I read it twice, then wrote back. "No, Evelyn, I didn't take anything. I simply gave everything back to the truth. You took your own life apart the moment you decided lies were more valuable than love." I never heard from her again. Adrian and I divorced quietly, not from anger but from necessity. We both needed to rebuild ourselves separately. He enrolled in graduate school, studying social work. He wanted to help people, he said, the right way this time, without his mother's shadow. I started my own foundation, the Dinah Marsh Foundation for Women's Health and Advocacy. Small, grassroots, focused on helping women navigate fertility treatments without manipulation or shame. Michael Hayes wrote a book about his father's story. It became a bestseller, a meditation on love and secrets and the weight of truth. His father passed away 2 months after the gala, finally at peace knowing his story had been told. A year after everything fell apart, I stood in my new office. It was small but mine, with windows overlooking a community garden in Brooklyn. My desk held photos of the women we'd helped, thank you notes from people who finally felt heard. I'd rebuilt my life from the ground up, and this time it was on my own terms. No one else's money, no one else's name, just mine. The foundation was growing slowly but steadily. We couldn't help everyone, but we helped some, and that mattered. Adrian called sometimes. He was doing better, he said. He'd connected with Michael Hayes, his half-brother. They were building a relationship carefully, like people who'd lost too much to rush anything. I'm thinking about changing my name, Adrian told me during one call. Maybe to Hayes or maybe something new entirely, I don't know yet. You'll figure it out, I assured him. You have time. That afternoon a new letter arrived. I recognized Evelyn's handwriting immediately. But when I opened it, the words surprised me. I'm dying, she wrote. Cancer, 6 months, maybe less. I don't expect sympathy, but I want you to know that you were right about all of it. I built an empire on sand and wondered why it collapsed. She didn't ask for forgiveness. I appreciated that. Some things can't be forgiven, only acknowledged. I never responded to Evelyn's final letter. Some conversations are better left unfinished. 3 months later, I received notice that she'd passed away. Small funeral, few attendees. Adrian went, though he didn't ask me to join him. That was right. That was his grief to navigate. I thought about her sometimes. The young woman in the photograph who'd chosen security over love, who'd spent 30 years protecting a lie that eventually consumed her. I wondered if she'd been happy, even for a moment. My foundation continued to grow. We opened a second office in Manhattan. We hired more staff. We helped hundreds of women navigate the complicated world of fertility treatment with dignity and support. Everything Evelyn's cruelty had taught me not to do. One afternoon, I was presenting at a medical conference when a young woman approached me. She was maybe 25, bright-eyed and nervous. I just wanted to say thank you, she said. Your foundation helped my sister when everyone else dismissed her concerns. You gave her hope. I hugged her, feeling the weight of everything I'd survived. Revenge, I realized, wasn't about destruction. It was about building something better from the ashes. That night I returned to my apartment and opened my laptop. I wrote one final message, not to send anywhere, just to say, truth always finds its way home, and so do we.